Hey everybody, this is Matt Lehman, the owner of Finders Thrift and Vinyl in La Quinta, California, and SpatulaCityRecords.com. So today, my topic is, what kind of turntable should I buy? I get asked that a lot, especially from people that are just getting into records and don't really know what to do, and they don't want to get hosed online, or they don't want to buy something that they're not going to be happy with. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer for you. I have several answers, and you'll have to decide from yourself what you're looking for, because realistically, it's kind of more about what you're getting into and what you're doing. I would never tell somebody to go buy a $500 turntable if they're buying $3 records. There's no point to it. If they plan on getting into more expensive records and it's a collection hobby, or it's becoming a hobby for them and a collectible thing where they're really starting to buy bigger records and they think it's something they're going to carry forward, then sure, I would say go ahead and buy a higher end record player. But I wouldn't say buy it right off the bat. I would say start and move your way up. And here's what I tell people when they first come into the shop and ask me what kind of turntable they should buy. Number one, there are, to me, four main groups of turntables in my mind. There are the introductory bottom of the barrel. They're not bad turntables, they're just the bottom of the barrel. There's a mid-range that has two sections, which I'll talk about a little bit more, and then you have your higher end tables, your projects and whatever other fancy turntables that are really, really expensive, that are more about aesthetics than anything. But we'll get to that in a minute. In those four sections, number one, the first section, the introductory, to me, those are Crosley's, or I can't remember what the other suitcase one is. They're considered introductory level because they're all-in-ones, meaning they usually have a CD player, a tape deck, a receiver, and speakers all connected. Again, they're very good for what they are. You can pay $100 or $80 or whatever it is, and you have everything. Your entire media system is contained in this thing. Problem is, the speakers on it are pretty crappy. Turntable on it's pretty crappy. Everything else is standard. So, and the reason that the turntable is crappy is because it's factory set, much like some of the mid-range, which I'll show you an example of in just a minute, and we'll get more into that. The speakers are not very good because they can't be very good, because if you have speakers attached to your turntable, you're going to cause vibrations, which is going to cause your records to skip, so you can't get a lot of bass out of them. So those are introductory, but they get a lot of credit because I still firmly believe that Crosley's and the other companies that started making turntables, again, back 10 years ago or whenever, really did a service to the industry for vinyl. And I think that they really get a lot of credit for bringing the resurgence of vinyl back into, especially to the younger generation. When I say younger, I mean under 20. They wouldn't really have had access to those turntables or anything unless somebody was bringing them back. So they get credit for that. Mid-range there's a variation of them. There's components, which is where you start getting into, you have to have components, meaning you have a receiver or an amp or a preamp or something that everything feeds into. That's where you have your component of a turntable, you have your CD player, you have your tape deck, you have your EQs and blah, 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 and all of that stuff. And speakers. So those are components. They all get plugged in together. They're separate. You can pick and choose which ones you like and which ones you don't like, which is a lot of fun, because maybe you like a little more bass, maybe you like a little more treble, maybe you like your vocals this, or maybe you want mono, blah, blah, blah. So you can cater to yourself and decide what you want. They also, and I just found this out, I didn't realize this, or I didn't know it, they have turntables now that are plug and play, meaning it already has a preamp in it, and all you have to do is get your speakers and plug them into the back of it, which is crazy cool. I don't keep up with technology. I know old stuff better than I know new stuff, so some of this you may be looking at me like you're an idiot, but I'm old, so I tend to stay with the older stuff. And they also have Bluetooth ones, same thing. They're plug and play, where you can just plug in your Bluetooth speakers and carry your speakers wherever you want in the house, which is also very, very cool, because you don't need wires, because if you come into the shop, you'll see wires hanging, because for the most part, you just can't hide wires. So those are very cool. They're very, very different options for different lifestyles, and different people need different things. So I don't necessarily think they're bad turntables. I tend to lean towards components. And again, when I walk you over to, actually, I'm just going to flip the camera around. When we go to the mid-range, I'll explain why I think it's a mid-range. Give me a second. Actually, it's going to be edited, so boom. Alrighty. This is a Yamaha P30. It is in the box. Fancy schmancy. Finders Thrift and Vinyl always has the coolest stuff. No, this is not the coolest stuff. This to me is a mid-range, low-end turntable. And here's why. Again, when somebody comes into my shop, I tell them, I don't care what brand of turntable you buy. It's irrelevant to me what brand you buy. I know there's people going to argue out there and say, no, you've got to have an Audio Technica, or you got to have a Techniques, or blah, whatever. I don't care what kind of turntable you buy. As long as it has these three components, you're setting yourself up for success. And these are the three things that I always look for, and you should be looking for in a turntable when you're out digging around. Number one, it needs to have a counterweight. This thing right here, this big ball on the back of the tone arm, this is the tone arm, needs to have a counterweight. And it doesn't need to just have a counterweight, it needs to have an adjustable counterweight, meaning you can spin it, you can twist it, it goes back and forth. This one does not. No buenos. It is factory set. So that means the factory puts it exactly where they want it to be, where they think all records should be played. That's fine and dandy because it makes it real easy for you to set up, but the problem is if you know what's really happening when you're playing a record, that is not good. When you're playing a record, you are actually putting a piece of metal against a piece of plastic. So you really don't want to put too much pressure on it because records are finite, meaning the more you play them, the more they die, or the quicker they die. They are not like a CD where it's a laser light going against it. They die. I'm sorry to say that. No matter what kind of turntable you have, every time you play a record, you are hurting it. It's a fact. So, but to save yourself that time, in more time with your records, you want to make sure that needle is just gently gliding across the record, so it's causing as little damage as possible. You don't know where that factory has been set at, and to be quite honest, most factory settings are a little bit heavy because the heavier weight means your records skip less because they have more weight digging into the record, so it doesn't pick up every nook and cranny or every little flaw in the record. It'll grind right over them, and grind is a perfect word for that. So I don't like set counterweights, and I certainly don't like no counterweights. This is your next piece of equipment. This is a head shell. This is a cartridge. I don't like this one. Why? Because it's proprietary. It does not come off. It is solid on there. If you pull that off, you're done. This turntable's broken. You have to buy a new one. That means that you are stuck buying whatever Yamaha wants you to have. If they have 3 different options for this turntable, that's all you get. 3 options. That's it. No more. If you have an adjustable headstock, these are all headstocks. Now, before you start yelling at me, all of the needles on these are dead soldiers. I pulled them off, and I just have headstocks in case anybody needs a headstock. Or a head shell, I'm sorry. I always call them headstocks, but they're head shells. So, this is a head shell. 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 You can see they come in many different shapes and styles and colors and variations to make you happy. Whatever you want, you can get. And they're all different brands. That's a Sansui. I don't know what all these are. But if you notice on the back, they all have 4-pin connectors because you can swap them out. You can buy whatever head shell you like. And the cartridges on these bad boys are all interchangeable as well. 99% of them are interchangeable. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes you have to have different clearance on them, blah, blah, blah. But 99% of the time, they're interchangeable. What does that mean for you? That means you're not stuck buying what Yamaha wants you to buy or whatever. Who else does that? Sony does that on a couple of their PLs. You can mix and match. So I can go out and buy a cartridge that's $5, or I can go out and buy a cartridge that is $5,000. Whatever floats your boat, whatever makes you happy. I'm not saying this is a bad cartridge. This isn't necessarily bad. It's just, it is what it is. This is why this is a mid-range, low-end component. You are stuck getting what you get. It's a good turntable. It's going to play your records. And you're not at a position, if you're buying this, where you're going to have $1,000 speakers or $1,000 receiver or anything like that. So again, this is a good turntable for what you're looking for. You may want to hook up to your computer, so you want a USB turntable. USB turntables are not necessarily the best turntables around, but they do a job. They provide a service. Number 3, thing I always look for is heft. I want this to be heavy. As I talked about a little bit ago on Crosley's, if you have your speakers anywhere near your turntable, you're going to probably cause feedback or vibration, and that's going to cause your records to skip. And if you have carpeting or you have your turntable on a desk or something and you walk by it, if you don't have heft, that turntable is going to skip, jump, pop, do all sorts of crazy things. Heavier the turntable, the better quality. Also, the heavier the turntable, the better quality, the better it is built. That means the platter. This is the platter. The platter is very, very heavy, and that helps keep your record still and causes less vibration and all that other good stuff. Now let's go to my turntable. Okay, so this is my turntable. This is a Sansui SR838. I'm not showing this off because I'm super proud of it or because I'm fancy schmancy and I'm a hipster and I have to have an expensive turntable. The reason I'm showing you this is because this is what I've done over the years. I have upgraded every time. Every time a new turntable comes in the shop, someone sells me a turntable. First thing I do is hook it up and I play it for 2 to 3 months to see if I like it. And I check out the cartridge to see if I like those cartridges. Maybe I don't like Auraphone cartridges. Turns out I do like Auraphone cartridges. They're fantastic. But I didn't know that until I got an Auraphone cartridge. And I got one because it came in on a turntable. I didn't know that I like Blue Tip number 2, I think is what it's called. Those are phenomenal cartridges, or needles, or stylus, or whatever you want to call them. They're phenomenally expensive as well. But if you look at my turntable, I have an adjustable counterweight back here. This goes back and forth, and I can twist it and do all kinds of things. I have an adjustable or an interchangeable head shell. I can change that any way I want. I have a very heavy turntable. This bad boy, it weighs somewhere in the neighborhood, I'm not kidding, I think 30 pounds, 35 pounds. It's not going anywhere. I've had earthquakes go through and it plays just fine. So that is what I recommend you do. Wherever you buy your turntable, you don't necessarily have to buy something new. Don't go to the store and buy something out of the box. I own a thrift store. I don't buy anything new. Go online, go to Craigslist, go to eBay, go to your thrift stores, go wherever it is that you can find used equipment, and continue to upgrade. Find your first turntable, and maybe you'll find an expensive one right off the bat. You don't necessarily need an expensive one. Expensive turntable, it's going to have, and I'll probably get beat up for this, they don't have anything special that any of the other turntables have. Those 3 things that I mentioned, those are the ones that are most important to you. Yes, what's the difference between a belt drive and a motor drive? I know I'm going to get beat up on this because I prefer belt drives. The reason I'm going to get beat up for it is audiophiles believe, and they are correct, that a motor-driven turntable will keep the correct speed longer than a belt, meaning your record is supposed to spin at 33 1/3 RPMs, rotations per minute, or 45 rotations per minute, which is what 33 and 45 and 78 and 12, is it 12? That's how fast they spin. On a motor driven, the motor is set to that speed, meaning it's going to be a constant speed for most of its life. As it starts to die out, it probably change a little bit, but that's a good indication that you know you need to change your motor or change your turntable. With a belt is literally driven by a belt or a giant rubber band. The giant rubber band sits around the platter on the inside, and it goes around the motor, and the motor grabs it. There's a lot of different things there that can cause the speed to change on a turntable. And if you don't change your belts out occasionally, and when I say occasionally, I mean like every 10 years, you'll start to notice that your music will change. It will slow down a little bit, most likely. If you hear that, then change the belt. But this is why I prefer belt turntables. They're a whole heck of a lot easier to work on. And I do work on turntables for myself and for resale, not as a repairman. I'm not qualified to do that, but I can fix it myself if I wanted to. Trying to fix a motor drive belt is a whole lot of gears and shenanigans and a hassle, and it's not worth the effort. Whereas a belt drive, and this is a good tip, and I tell people this as well, if you're hitting a thrift store and you look at a turntable, you can pull the platter up. If you pull the rubber mat off, the rubber mat should, if it's a belt drive, the rubber mat will come up, and then there'll be 2 round holes on either side of the platter. Stick your hand in like a bowling ball, pull that up, and you'll see that there's just a belt that's in there. That's how you change a belt. It's very, very easy to do. But that's an important tip if you're out searching at thrift stores, or if you even see on Craigslist and on eBay, and I see this a lot on eBay. If you're looking at a seller, keep an eye on what they're selling as well. If all they do is sell audio equipment, then they know what they're talking about. So if you find one that says needs parts or repairs, and if you're handy, maybe take a stab at it. I'm not saying commit to that because you're going to be into it for some money. If you don't know what you're doing, stay away from it. But if you know how to use a screwdriver and tinker with things, then you most likely can get a turntable up and running. There's only 2 or 3 things that you need for a turntable to work. But if it's a seller on eBay that is selling socks and fans and buttons and jewelry and whatever, and they don't have a lot of other turntables, they may not know what they're looking at. And as a reseller, I don't always know what I'm looking at. And I also look at it and say, look, if this turntable is worth $100 brand new or $100 in perfect working shape, and it's not in working shape and I'm gonna have to put $50 into it, I don't want to chase bad money with good money. I'd rather sell it for parts for $50 or let somebody else pick it up for $50. So look for that kind of stuff. But when you're at a thrift store, if they give you the chance to plug it in, they probably won't give you a chance to plug it into a receiver or something. But if you can plug it in, hit play, and the deck doesn't spin, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That may actually save you a whole lot of money. Because a lot of times when people donate stuff, they don't take very good care of it, or when they're putting it on shelves, they're not paying very close attention to it, and that belt can come off very, very easily. So if you turn that turntable on and hit play, and you stick your ear to it and you hear a motor whirling or a motor moving, but the deck isn't moving, 9 times out of 10, hell, I'll even say it 99 times out of 100, you're most likely either missing a belt or the belt has just fallen off. Belts will cost you $5 to $10, depending on what kind of turntable it is. That, in my book, is a pretty good return on investment if you can buy a broken or as-is turntable, put $5 into it, and have a working turntable. Also, if it has a used headstock, then great, you're in good shape. You can usually... I'm not going to go down that road. So those are things to look out for. And as I said with my turntable, I started out with just a generic. The first turntable I had was an Ion because it came through the shop, and I was like, all right, well, I got records, I'll play this, and I wasn't a record store. And I started burning CDs or records that I didn't have in my CD collection. And then another turntable came in, and then another one, and then another one. So that's where all of my knowledge has come from. So work your way up and find out what works for you. And you don't necessarily, if you're not looking to get into components, then you don't need those 3 things that I talked about. You just need whatever works for you. Maybe it's a USB, maybe it's a Bluetooth. And those Bluetooth turntables are pretty darn cool. Because like I said, you can put your speakers, if you have a pool and you want to put them out by the pool, your turntable's inside, your speakers are outside. That's actually pretty cool. I can't do that. But decide for yourself. If you are the guy that's buying collectible records at $100 a record, do yourself a favor and don't play them on the lower end turntables because you're just beating yourself up. Lastly, on this topic, I want to talk about, because these are the death of records, and I know people love them, and I was selling them, and I've gotten to a point to stop selling because people don't use them properly. You know, the big console systems, the ones that are, your grandmother had them, or your parents had them. They're usually 6 feet long. There's a almost look like a piece of furniture. They are a piece of furniture. They usually have a flip top where the record player is underneath it and the speakers are attached inside it. Those are console systems. You need to be very, very careful with those, because most of the time, those early ones, if you look on, they're all, the tone arm, same thing. The tone arm is set to where it is. There is no counterweight on most of them. Some of the later ones that came out in the 70s, they are, but those early ones have a flip needle on them. You can play 78s on them, which is really, really cool, because you can't play 78s on most new turntables. They just don't have the speed because they require a different needle. But on those older console ones, they have a flip needle, meaning when you flip it to the left, it plays 45s or 33s. When you flip it to the right, it plays 78s. Problem with those is, and most people don't know this, is those are mono stereos, meaning they only play mono. They do not play stereo records. You can put a stereo record on it, but you're destroying your stereo records. Same thing, this is why mono records tend to hold more value and tend to last longer and are better records. I'm not going to get into the difference between mono and stereo in this episode. I will discuss that in a later one. But the difference between a mono and stereo record is very important for buying turntables and for playing on consoles. So a mono turntable and a mono record has much, much wider grooves. I think they're almost 2.5 to 1 side. The groove is 2.5 to 1 compared to a stereo groove is that big. That is because a mono needle is also 2.5 times as wide as a stereo needle. Now, in realistic points, that's in microns. I mean, that's teeny, teeny, tiny. It doesn't mean much to you or me. It doesn't mean much difference. But to a record, it means a ton. The problem with putting stereo records on a mono turntable is a stereo record has a very, very, very tiny groove. And when you put that big fat ass needle on a mono cartridge on that turntable, it is just eating and eating and eating your records. It's destroying them. Flip of that is perfect. A mono record will play on a stereo receiver perfectly, wonderfully. In fact, they usually play better on a stereo because they have much wider, fatter grooves. That little teeny tiny stereo needle just grinds right through them. Even if they have scratches and are all beat to hell, they still will probably play pretty good on a stereo turntable because the needle is much smaller and it has so much room to work that it doesn't really require all of the doesn't pick up everything that's in a groove. So, to sum up, don't play stereo records on a mono turntable. They do sell mono cartridges, and that's super high end. You're most likely, I'm not sure if you can buy just a straight mono cartridge. You have to have some sort of an adapter for your turntable, so it's not something you need to worry about. If you're buying a needle, 99.99999% of all turntables sold today are stereo equipment. The only ones you have to worry about are the console ones and occasionally some really crazy high-end one that people just want mono, as far as I'm concerned. So you don't have to worry about that. But if you do have a console or your grandma has a console, don't go buy a brand new stereo reissue Beatles Sgt. Pepper's and put it on there because you're just going to eat it up. It's not going to destroy it the first time through, but you're definitely doing way more damage to it than you need to be doing. Turntables are very personal. You have to decide for yourself what you're looking for, but I hope that those tips help you out and get you started on the road to finding a system that works for you. Thanks for listening. As always, if you're looking for records, go to SpatulaCityRecords.com or come to Finders Thrift and Vinyl in La Quinta. We also have a new shop, Dale's Records in Palm Desert. We're not affiliated, but he's a good friend of mine. He just opened up. I'm really happy to have him in town. And he's probably very happy to have me in town because he's been working at record stores for 1,000 years before I ever came into this game. So. But he has his own shop now, which is really cool. He sells turntables. He sells a lot of the mid-range stuff, which have the USB and the Wi-Fi and all the fun stuff, which is where I learned this information. I had no idea until he showed me. So it's really, really cool stuff. Check it out. If you have questions, you can contact him at Dale's Records. You can also contact me, shoot me an email, or message me. And please remember, SpatulaCityRecords.com. 9 records, buy 9 records, and the 10th is a penny. Free shipping on orders of $50 or more. And every record, every record is ultrasonically cleaned and re-sleeved before it's shipped. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.